Absolutely. This is a big change. And on your screens, you're seeing Narayan Rane, the Rajya Sabha MP for Maharashtra. He has been a 6-time MLA and a first-time MLC in Maharashtra. He served as Maharashtra's Chief Minister, being sworn in, taking the oath there. Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, I want to address the issue that was just being raised there by A.K. Bhattacharya and what we're seeing happen as far as the health portfolio specifically is concerned. And, you know, one of our previous commentators gave an interesting narrative to the kind of changes and the exits that we are seeing, that this is really an exercise that's happening from a position of vulnerability, not necessarily from a position of strength. And that would explain perhaps why the government and the Prime Minister felt the need to do this purge as far as the health portfolio is concerned, given the reaction and the palpable anger that we saw post the second wave through the months of May, and of course that continues. Kiran, what do you make of that?
Well, you know, Shireen, first and foremost, we have seen some major names also exiting from the cabinet. So I think we should not just see the health ministry in isolation, because we have seen some very, very big names also quitting. But having said that, I think the health ministry does need revamping. I do believe that there has been a lot of criticism in terms of the way the health ministry has gone about, managing COVID. And I think we have seen a lot of concerns and voices raised about many aspects of COVID management, including, the oxygen requirement, the shortage of ventilators, and of course the whole vaccination process, the way it's been sort of mishandled in terms of the way the government has gone about allocating vaccines, pricing vaccines, banning exports. I really think we do need a refresh button to be pressed, and that's what the Prime Minister has done across the board. It's not just about healthcare, because I do believe that India needs to now urgently get back onto economic revival. And I think this time around, I hope that industry gets its fair share of attention, because all this time I think we focused on social welfare aspects, which is also very important, but I think going forward we do need to focus on many aspects of our economy. I also believe that India must become a very key part of the global supply chain when it comes to any sector, especially healthcare. And we have sacrificed some of this in the way we've banned exports of drugs and vaccines. And I just hope that whoever takes charge of the health ministry, looks at these kind of aspects, because we simply cannot be left out of the global supply chains.
Yeah, you're right in pointing out that this is a refresh, a reset. You could call it what you like. And it's not just health, but it's a larger refresh and a reset that we are seeing. We just saw Sarbananda Sonowal, two-time Lok Sabha MP from Assam, the Chief Minister of Assam, being sworn in there. And now on our screens, Virendra Kumar, Lok Sabha MP from Madhya Pradesh, 7th-term MP. He is being sworn in currently. But let me bring Pankaj Mohindroo into the conversation. Pankaj, we're talking about a refresh and a reset. Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw was talking about it in the context of health. But what do you make of the exit of Ravi Shankar Prasad? Here was a minister, he was overseeing and supervising key schemes like the PLI scheme for manufacturing in your sectors. What do you make of this exit?
Shireen, I'll break it into two parts. In the competition of nations, India has lagged behind, In 1990, our per capita income was almost on par with China. Today, we are 1/5. So obviously, there is a lot of restlessness in the nation and among the people, and I think in the Prime Minister also. And this is something the recast he wants to do is to propel the governance in a manner that there is more electric charge in the governance. That's what one sees. Obviously, I'm not an expert in politics. But this massive reshuffle is an indication of that. Now, 7 years, Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad has been the IT minister, and a lot has been accomplished in these 7 years. But I think this sector is so large. I'll just give you a startling statistic. Almost 25% of the global capitalization is towards this sector, which is about $15-16 trillion. Although the sector's turnover is about $3-4 trillion, that's the potential of this sector. And I can't comment on exactly why Raviji has chosen to resign, but I think I'm sure he has many new assignments in store for him. But the sector's requirement.
We'll have to see what those new assignments are likely to be. Pankaj, I'm just interrupting you because we've got Jyotiraditya Scindia, former Congress leader there, being sworn in, Rajya Sabha MP from Madhya Pradesh, being sworn in as part of the Modi cabinet. Let me bring in AKB before I get Sabha Naqvi into the conversation. AKB, just a quick word on Ravi Shankar Prasad's exit. Now, there's been several controversies, especially in the last few months, whether it has to do with the IT rules, the confrontation with social media companies like Twitter. What do you make specifically of this particular exit?
Well, there is no doubt that for the last 6 to 8 months, India's economic capital as well as political capital with international investors has not been doing too well for itself. In the sense that while we were getting foreign investment by way of share purchase in Indian companies, the fact of the matter is that greenfield investment from foreign companies were not coming forth as the way they should have, given the size of the Indian market. Now, what we have seen is that in the last 6 months, Indian government's battles with various international companies, particularly in the space of the e-commerce as well as the companies like Apple, Google, or Amazon. Now, that has clearly, roiled the water, so to say, as far as the foreign investment climate is concerned. Now, I do not know whether Mr. Prasad's resignation is linked to that, but certainly the foreign investing community representing this class will probably heave a sigh of relief and look forward to an engagement with a new minister who will look at these issues with a fresh pair of eyes and probably help build India's political capital in the foreign investing committee as well as the economic capital that has been on the wane very clearly.
Yes, and on our screens at this point in time, we've got Mr. Ramchandra Prasad Singh, Rajya Sabha MP from Bihar, serving his second term as MP, retired IS officer of the 1984 batch, who is being sworn in. Sabha Naqvi, let me bring you in here. We were talking about some of the exits. We're still awaiting clarity as far as portfolio allocation is concerned. We, of course, have clarity on some of the new inductees. We just saw Jyotiraditya Scindia there being sworn in. What do you make of the direction that Prime Minister Modi is trying to take, the messaging that he's trying to send out with these changes, with this expansion?
So as far as Ravi Shankar Prasad and Prakash, of course everybody is right in what they're saying specifically about sectors, but let me get to the politics of it. Ravi Shankar Prasad and Prakash Javadekar were the interface with the media. They were the ones who dealt with all of us, with those who covered the BJP, with those who covered the government. Prakash Javadekar gave the cabinet briefings, right? Ravi Shankar Prasad has had a high-profile battle with Twitter. The Prime Minister politically is very conscious of his own image. This is a Prime Minister who creates his own image. I don't think you can say, and Ravi Shankar Prasad is also, you have controversial IT rules having been framed right now. I think they have been dropped. They have been dropped, and that is not significant. Every day the newspapers has reports of some new case being filed against Twitter. That is what is happening right now. So there is a problem there, and we have to see who replaces them now. The kind of individuals that they get to replace these two gentlemen who had a lot to do with the media. Ravi Shankar Prasad in particular may have taken on more than he could chew, in my view. That is my reading of the situation. This was going to go nowhere because Twitter was too huge to respond. They were almost not even responding. They were not even playing ball to ball. So we get into very, very complicated terrains over here. But those are two, as a journalist, I note that. And I think those are significant changes that they have been dropped right now. And now we have to wait and see who gets those portfolios, which involves an interface with the media. Of course, and there are so many other changes that we have to look out for. Shireen.
Right. Mr. Bhattacharya, just coming to you once again, do you also believe that the Prime Minister felt some serious need for course correction? Something was clearly going wrong with the handling of the pandemic over the last 2 years, and that's why this major reshuffle, also making sure that big names from the cabinet like Ravi Shankar Prasad, Prakash Javadekar, who are handling so many of those PLI schemes, some of those PLI schemes are still pending. They were moved out. Dr. Harshvardhan was moved out. Somewhere the government believed that things would go horribly wrong if they were to go to elections next year in those 6 states with the current team.
Well, I think, as I said in the beginning, that quite a few birds have been killed with one stone. And it will probably be, premature on our part to say that how many of those birds are real and how many birds were there were fake. In the sense that whether it is punishing a minister for failure in discharging his duties is whether is actually a punishment to the minister or whether it is a deflection of a blame that would have come to somebody else. So I think we have to be very clear in our mind, and when we see finally who gets these new portfolios, we will get a clearer picture. But what is quite evident from the manner in which there are a dozen ministers have quit, it shows that who are the ministers who have quit? You have a labour minister who has done well with the labour reforms. You had an education minister who had brought in the new education policy. You had a health minister who did his best, but probably things went out of control with the second wave. Now, who is to blame for it? Was it the health minister or somebody else? We do not know. So therefore, to say that health, education and labour ministers to go and to blame it on the minister's performance, I do not know how far we are correct. But yes, Mr. as well as Mr. Javadekar, but the face of this government as far as the media is concerned, and the manner in which the battles were waged with large number of foreign companies in the social media platforms like Twitter, Apple, even Netflix, Google. I think that there was a perception that India's foreign capital was getting depleted, and India's destination as a foreign investment, well, that image was getting dented. So this is the course correction. Yes, of course, this is the way to send out a signal to the foreign investing community that India is open to doing business with not only these large e-commerce giants, social media platforms, but it is also looking at some sort of a policy corrections that one has to see whether they are being implemented when the new ministers take oath and take charge of these ministries.
Yes, and on our screens, Kiran Rijiju there being sworn in. But let's talk about some of the new inductees. And this one perhaps has been a little bit of a surprise. At least not a lot of people were talking about his name as a possible inductee in the run-up to this cabinet reshuffle and expansion exercise. And remember, the speculation has been on for a while. Rajiv Chandrasekhar, Rajya Sabha MP from Karnataka, third-time MP, serves on various parliamentary standing committees. I don't know what portfolio he's likely to be given, but I would imagine that given his domain expertise, etc., it could be some of the economic ministries that we've just spoken of. AKB, I'll get to you in just a second, but Pankaj, Mohindroo, what would the expectation now be as far as industry is concerned to steer forward the reforms that have already been announced but are yet to be concluded?
Shireen, can I just comment for a moment on what AKB was saying as far as the environment with companies like Apple, etc. Now, Apple is a very major participant in the PLI for mobile phone electronics, which is three of the participants, Foxconn, Wistron and Pegatron, are backed by Apple, and that is a huge show of confidence in India. I am not commenting about Twitter, but I think, as I said before, a lot has been accomplished in our sector, but the sector is very vast, so probably there are aspirations which further need to be fulfilled. And Ravi Shankarji's had a 7-year uninterrupted stint in IT and electronics. So I think
yes.
sometimes there is time to move on and so on. So that is probably what it is. Shireen, question, sorry?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right, and I think that is the point that AKB was making as well, that it would be an unfair speculation to attribute non-performance to the changes or the exits that we are seeing, because remember, it is not entirely the responsibility of just the minister in charge, especially as far as this government is concerned. The Prime Minister's office is involved with crucial decisions, so it would be an unfair speculation to attribute the changes entirely to those being linked to performance. Well, on our screens, let's just quickly take our viewers through who is being sworn in currently. And remember, there's at least half a dozen women ministers who will also be sworn in. And I know that is something that both Sabha Naqvi and Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw are going to be happy to note. What we just saw on our screens was the Power Minister, R.K. Singh, taking oath. And next up is the Aviation Minister, the Minister of State for Commerce and Industry, Hardeep Puri. He is there taking the oath of office. The expectation is that there will be a change as far as a portfolio is concerned. But Kiran, to the point that I was making, at least half a dozen women who are going to be inducted.
Well, it would have been nice to have seen a larger number of women inducted, but at least, as you say, there are half a dozen. And I look forward to, seeing what portfolios that everyone gets. It's not just about the women getting portfolios, but I really am, I think we are all waiting with bated breath to see what portfolios these new ministers get. So I think before we hear that, it's going to be very difficult to speculate on how the new cabinet is going to function.
Yes, and we're still awaiting details. No clarity on when that announcement is likely to come through. One would imagine that at the end of the ceremony, perhaps we will.
So I just wanted
yes, Kiran.
No, I just wanted to add to what some of my other fellow panelists have said, and I think we really need to look at our international image now, because I think we have lost a little bit of that capital that we had enjoyed all these years, and I think in the recent past we have lost some of that. So I hope that with these new faces and hopefully with new policies, we will be able to salvage some of that reputation.
Yes, and that is a point that everyone is making on the panel. But Sabha, I want to come back to you. And address the larger issue of the political messaging this expansion and reshuffle exercise sends out, especially to the poll-bound states. And we have seen a significant emphasis on representation for crucial states like Uttar Pradesh, which is going to be the big battle. What do you take away as the big political message from this exercise?
So what is startling this time, Shireen, is that they've not just given you the state allocations. The government has issued a statement on the caste and the sub-caste. You have one critique. This is very unusual. We know broadly there are OBCs and there are Dalits. They have specified, the government brief to media in writing has specified sub-caste. This is a Dalit, this is a Khatik, this is a Kurmi OBC. They have done that. So it's interesting, this kind of detailing, that they have done so in official documents, handed over to be shared with the media. So of course, a lot of it is political management. The BJP's social project is based on non-dominant backward caste, non-dominant Dalit caste, and they have the most significant election for them is from Uttar Pradesh, which is coming up. And but it's very, very unusual, to give this kind of breakup to the media of specific castes. And one could also turn around and pose the question that when you, on the one level you say we are casteless and all, which of course we are not, but then you give this kind of detailed, explicit breakdown, not just into OBC, scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, but within that which specific subcaste people belong to. So this is unusual in this expansion.
Well, that was a point that many panelists that we've been speaking to, many experts who are looking at this exercise were also pointing out that this is a very carefully calibrated, very carefully thought through exercise in terms of ensuring that the social engineering, in Vinod Sharma's words, the social masonry that needs to be constructed ahead of the elections in those crucial poll-bound states is intact. But AKB, this is guessing time, we're all speculating, but given the past experience of people like Jyotiraditya Scindia or somebody like a Rajiv Chandrasekhar or a Meenakshi Lekhi, I mean, where do you see them fitting into this grand scheme of things?
Well, I mean, I can take a guess, and I don't know whether it's an act of stupidity on my part or not, but let me take a guess. I think, people like Scindia would obviously be used in an economic ministry, given their past experience and having handled not only power as well as corporate affairs. So I would imagine some of the ministries which are now handled by, two major ministries are being handled by one person. So I think this will be an opportunity for the Prime Minister to split those ministries in terms of the ministerial responsibility and have Jyotiraditya Scindia to either whether it is the railways or the corporate affairs or whether it is coal or power, so there are so many ministries which Mr. Scindia can do. I saw Mr. Hardeep Puri being sworn in. Probably he is being paid cabinet minister rank, or I would imagine that he would be used in another key economic ministry which can be used. Meenakshi Lekhi, given her experience as a lawyer, may get into law. Mr. Prasad has quit, so who knows that she becomes the law minister. I think the key minister of state I would be looking forward to, as I said in the past, is who is the minister of state for public enterprises, because that is the ministry which will determine the fate and pace of privatization of a large number of public sector units that the government has planned, and this budget revenues depend a lot on that. And most importantly, the asset monetization, which are right now under the public sector unit charts. So how the government goes about those asset monetization will depend a lot on this new Minister of State for Public Enterprises, which, as I said, will be now merged with the Finance Ministry. So I think, there are some interesting names, and you will see these new names like Mr. Scindia or Mr. Hardeep Puri, who is being promoted, take additional responsibilities. One key point I would like to make is that health and education will be a very key ministry. There will be key ministries because even though they are not economic by nature, every business is critically important and dependent on the kind of ministers that you have in both education as well as in health. So industry will look forward to this new ministers in charge of these portfolios.
Absolutely. There will be a lot of focus on these two portfolios, health and education. And Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, back to the point that was being re-emphasized there by AKB on the Department of Public Enterprises overnight ahead of this expansion and reshuffle exercise being merged with the Finance Ministry, signaling the intent of the government to stay the course as far as privatization, disinvestment and asset monetization is concerned. Separately, we've also got an announcement coming in of the Ministry of Cooperation, which ostensibly is to nurture the cooperative model that we had. So it's not so much cooperation, but nurturing the cooperative model that started with the likes of Amul, etc. And that's that is an important aspect. I don't know if it required a whole ministry, but Kiran, what do you make of the government's intention to stay the course on crucial reforms?
I think at least the signals are positive, and even if you talk about the Ministry of Cooperation or cooperatives, I think the fact that the agri policies are now focusing on FPOs, I think that also calls for a very, very strong focus on how do we go about creating these very important cooperatives that will actually probably double farmer incomes. and also get us into value-added agriculture. So I think you do need these kind of, aspects of the economy to be looked at. But I also hope that, the monetization of public assets is also going to be done in a timely way, because we do need to be pragmatic about how we go about creating our economic revival and, address some of these non-performing assets which are there in the public sector and see how the private sector can be leveraged to really, do a better job of running these kind of enterprises. So I think there's a lot of, thought behind all these various initiatives and changes that the government is thinking about. As I said, I'm really looking forward to seeing whether there's going to be a change in policy more than just seeing new faces. Because if it is just going to be, old wine in new bottles, then that's not going to be very good for the economy. I think we really need to make sure that when we talk about refresh and reset, it's really about, focusing on new policies, because I really think COVID needs new policies. I think if we don't get into new ways of looking at economic revival, and if it's going to be business as usual, it's not going to work. I think countries and economies the world over are rebooting their economies in very different ways, and I think we really need to be innovative about how we go forward. We just had a recent meeting with the finance minister in Bangalore, and I think we had a good, very honest and frank and wide-ranging discussion with the finance minister about technology, about startups and what have you, and I think the government is in a mood to listen.
All right, you're saying the government is in a mood to listen. There needs to be a reset, a restart, a refresh button when it comes to the government's approach to the business. And we need to regain some of our political capital as well, as both AKB and Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw also pointed out. But Sabha Naqvi, just to come to the calculations and statewide allocation of ministers, we're seeing 8 from UP, 5 from Gujarat, Anurag Thakur from Himachal being elevated to the rank of a cabinet minister, Ajay Bhatt from Uttarakhand, also significantly not from states going to elections, 4 from West Bengal, and the Tamil Nadu BJP chief being elevated, being brought into the cabinet as well. How do you see the allocation of portfolios state-wise?
So I think Uttar Pradesh is fairly self-explanatory along with the detailed caste breakups that they've provided. For instance, the Labour Minister, Mr. Santosh Gangwar, who is a 8-term MP, if I'm not mistaken, he was a Kurmi caste. He has gone out. There are a couple of points I'll make here. One, Anupriya Patel, who gets in, is also Kurmi. That could be a factor. The other factor could be that Mr. Gangwar had actually gone public with his distress over this management of COVID in the state of Uttar Pradesh. So it's possible that the Chief Minister, Adityanath Yogi, may not have been, so enamored of him. But he's been around for a long time, Mr. Gangwar. He's out now, the Labour Minister. Anupriya Patel, same caste, gets in. Bengal, even though the election is over, is very, very important for them, because you have, in terms of number of seats, after Uttar Pradesh is Maharashtra, and then it's Bengal. So for the Lok Sabha, they have made gains in North Bengal, political gains, and they need to win in the MP election. So it's not going to be a state where you just came like buccaneers, you fought a battle, you lost mostly, you got a few pockets. They need to preserve that non-traditional area for the Lok Sabha election. We are halfway through the term of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and this is the huge image correction exercise, the huge outreach that he's doing right now. So I am not surprised to see individuals from Bengal remain there, because Bengal is still new territory, and they did do well in the Lok Sabha polls of 2019, and they would hope to hold on to some terrain there. A lot of the people would be from North Bengal also. So there is a calculation in all of this, and of course some people have to be just upgraded, rewarded. Who can you rely on, who can you trust? But UP and Bengal is because of clear political reasons.
Yes, and that explains the arithmetic and how it's been worked out. But AKB, I know we need to let you go, so let me come to you for closing comments. To the point that Kiran was making, that the hope is that this is going to mean a refresh and a reset, even as far as policy is concerned, not just in terms of faces. Where do you believe the focus now needs to be? What would you like to see this new refresh team prioritize?
Well, I agree that, the policy reset is very important goal if this new team of ministers have to be effective. I think the most important, area to focus on would be in the project implementation, the policy implementation stage. There are policy gaps in many areas. And I think there is a tendency on the part of the government to return to the pre-1990 status of where government controls and government interferes, and take the new e-commerce policy, which is actually rolling back many of the reforms that were introduced in the last 30 years. So I think if the new ministry, the restructuring will make a difference if they lead to policy reset or policy overhaul, but one has to see how these policy overhaul goals are achieved or are looked at. But there are two things, in the end, I would like to say that yes, it is a very big ministerial overhaul, but I think no less an overhaul is when 12 ministers resign. Where will they go? They will go and hopefully strengthen the party. So you have 12 veterans of the party who are actually going back to probably the states, and probably they will be used to strengthen the party work in various states wherever they go. So I think just as it is the ministerial reshuffle to strengthen the governance structure, I think it is very important to know that if you have 12 ministers who are now being thrown back into the party hopefully will be able to take full advantage of how to make better use, more effective use in the party's work and functioning in various states where they operate.
Yes, and that's an important point, something that perhaps has not been given enough attention. But as AKB was pointing out, these are veteran leaders of the Bharatiya Janata Party who have decided to exit the government, and their bandwidth, their experience will perhaps now be used as far as strengthening the party's activities across different states ahead of the elections. Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, I'm going to give you the closing comments as well. You talked about some of the imperatives that someone like you as a member of industry is hoping for. Just to understand where things currently stand on the ground, the hope is that now with restrictions lifting, with hopefully the worst behind us, at least in this wave as far as the pandemic is concerned, that business confidence will start to revive, will start to pick up. What is the sense that you get? And also importantly, what is it that you would like to see from the government?
Well, Shireen, I think we must wait for the new portfolios to be assumed by the new ministers. But I, for one, I do hope that we will focus on various, policies that really incentivize growth. I think we are really in a very precarious position right now because let's face it, I think the small businesses and the SMEs in general have seen huge impact because of the pandemic. We've seen huge job losses, and I think our focus has to be on four things, I would say. One is, of course, investments. I think we need to get investments back on track in mega projects. I think we need to basically focus on exports. I think that also needs really policies that incentivize exports. We need to make sure that we focus on job creating activities. We need to focus on, therefore, I believe a startup economy is a big opportunity for India. And as someone who comes from the pharma sector, I really believe research is something I would like to really see investment in. And, beyond that, of course, we've got huge challenges in healthcare and education which need huge investments. So I think across the board, we have an opportunity to invest and unleash a very, very large potential.
Right.
Right. Pankaj, Mohindroo, just to bring you in at this stage. Now, over the last several months, we have seen a rather tense relationship between the government, e-commerce companies and Twitter as well, and social media platforms. What kind of change of approach is needed to regain investor confidence, that political capital that Mr. AKB spoke about, that Kiran Mazumdar spoke about, that we have lost possibly over the last few months?
You see, as far as the manufacturing industry globally is concerned, India's stock has actually gone up because we have shown in March, April, May, June that India is a very resilient economy, and we've kept the show going in spite of the huge pandemic while nations have shut down. And particularly I'm talking about Vietnam, and that's a big opportunity for us to capitalize. On the Twitter and e-commerce companies, e-commerce is not something which is handled by the mighty Ministry of Electronics and IT. And that relationship has been a bit combative, but I think we are going towards resolutions and which will satisfy everybody. India has a very large, small retailers, and their concerns are very important politically. And so is the investment climate. So I think this balance is really important, and it's a very tightrope walk. The Twitter controversy, so to say, I think is just a storm in a teacup, and that should get sorted out. It's nothing which should concern us. So
you're right in pointing out that the e-commerce guidelines and the e-commerce policy are handled by the Commerce Ministry. Shobha Karanjale there on our screens being sworn in. Just before that, we saw Rajiv Chandrasekhar, Rajya Sabha MP from Karnataka, being sworn in. Sabha Naqvi, that's been one of the surprises, at least as far as I'm concerned. That was a surprise. I hadn't heard of Rajiv Chandrasekhar's name doing the rounds as a possible inductee ahead of this cabinet reshuffle and expansion exercise. Who, to your mind, have emerged as the dark horses from the list announced today?
Well, I'll say one thing very clearly. Whatever portfolio he gets, I know that he belongs to a certain class and people are comfortable, they know him. There should be no conflict of interest. We should never forget those things. He has certain business interests and there should not be a conflict of interest. One, I believe that we have forgotten those basic rules. In my book, one of the most important issues, besides the hunger that is out there, there is a shortage of ration all over Delhi right now. People in ration, they're just running out. Besides hunger, is the IT rules are problematic. They're taking away freedoms. And I just hope that with the new IT minister, we revisit that. Because that's why we're getting bad press across the world. That's why the Modi image is taking a hit. It's because we are looking like a country which is trying to criminalize, which is first harassing Twitter. It may be a storm in a teacup, but it's a storm which is being written about all over the world. Every publication all over the world has written it. There are sort of multiple prosecutions going on. Every day there's a new complaint against them. IT rules make it possible for all cinema, content, web owners, all of them to be harassed again and again. So those must go. Those are things that I wish for. That's my wish list. Hunger and freedom. I don't want hunger to be tackled, and I want freedom of expression to be preserved in my country.
Yes, an important aspect being brought out there by Sabha Naqvi in terms of portfolio allocation of potential conflict of interest. Remember, Rajiv Chandrasekhar is a businessman who has interests across media, formerly had interests across telecom, etc. as well. So one will have to see how the portfolio allocation is in fact done. Minister still taking oath, no clarity yet on portfolio allocation. Pankaj, a quick final word from you before we let you go in terms of what the expectation is now from this new team?
As you see, everybody said the portfolios need to be known before I can comment on that. But I'm very or the direction of the government in terms what the Prime Minister has said that India should be number one in mobile phone manufacturing globally. We are moving towards that, surely. And other verticals like IT hardware, now we have, LED air conditioners, PLIs, we have the telecom equipment PLI. All these are very sure directions. And we need more momentum behind them. We need to build, there is a lot to do, as we say, dil mange more. And I'm sure we will, the entire team together will make it happen.
Yes, dil mange more, certainly, and at least as far as women representation is concerned, we've seen an improvement with today's ministers being inducted, and on your screens you're seeing Darshana Jardosh taking oath as